Hello everybody, it's Pete Morrison here from Bohemia Interactive Simulations, and this is a VBS update for VBS Tech 2020. So here's the agenda. I'm going to give you a brief update about our company, Bohemia Interactive Simulations. I'm going to talk then about our technology and products, starting with the World Server, moving through VBS4, VBS3, and then I'll give you an update on TerraTools. So BISim is primarily a software developer. We've been focused on building military simulation software for over 15 years now, focused on NATO and NATO allies. We have over 300 staff in total, with more than 200 technical staff, and we're always working on a lot of projects. Our flagship product is VBS3, and it's used in over 60 countries around the world. And we recently launched new products, VBS4, VBS Blue IG, and the VBS World Server. Just to give you an idea of the kind of work that we're doing at the moment, here is just sort of 3 example efforts. The first one, which I'll go into more detail later on in the brief, is to extend the CBRN capability in VBS for the US Marine Corps. And this will be for both VBS3 and VBS4. And you can see the kinds of work that we're doing here on the left. And a key point is that when we do this kind of work, all of these improvements are included in the VBS baseline so everybody can benefit from them. Another example effort is VRLT for the UK MOD. That's a research activity to evaluate the use of VR in land-based collective training. We're now in phase 2, and you can see the photo down the bottom here of UK soldiers immersed in VR doing tactical training. The current effort is focused on dismounted weapon use and larger scale. And again, the various improvements that we're making to VBS for VR training will roll into our baselines. And also this week, we're really excited to announce our support for the XR3, the Vario XR3. What you can see here is a video from one of the headsets that we're using for our demonstration in our Orlando office. So we can see here we have an Apache simulator. We're mixing the real world in the center there with the virtual on the outside. We're using a bug-eye chair for the actual controls for the helicopter, and the simulation host is FlexAir by SASim. So we're really excited about this. It's working really, really well. And if you'd like to see it in action and check out the Vario XR3 for yourself, please get in contact. We're running this demonstration at our Orlando office. And I'll just move the video forward here because our pilot will land at an FOB, as you can see. And we're really happy with the performance of VBS Blue IG running this new device. As you can see, we provide really high fidelity and high performance in the image generator running in the Vario XR3. So here's our technology map as it stands today. We have VBS4, which is a whole earth virtual desktop training and simulation host, supporting VBS3 capability plus terrain editing and mission planning. So it's a really full-featured tool. And it's very easy to use, and the focus really is on making the generation of content more efficient. And we'll look at that in some detail. We then have VBS Blue IG, which is our image generator, driven by VBS4 or by a SIGI simulation host. And both VBS4 and VBS Blue IG share the VBS Blue rendering and terrain ingestion engine. I'll talk a bit more about that as well. We also optionally offer the VBS World Server, which can stream whole earth terrain layers to VBS4, VBS Blue IG, and also other runtimes. And I'll talk a bit about what we're doing with Epic and the Unreal Engine in a few slides. We offer powerful SDKs to allow developers to customize or extend our products, and we use these SDKs every day in our own development. So many of the modules that you see in VBS4, VBS Plan, VBS Geo are built upon these SDKs. And we have TerraTools, last but not least, a very powerful terrain editing tool for large area terrains, leveraging procedural generation. So that's our technology map. We're going to kind of look at some of this now and just provide an update on where we're at later in the brief. I'm going to start talking about terrain and the BISim World Server for powerful and correlated procedural generation. Now, this technology has really taken on a life of its own. It used to be really like a supporting product, the VBS World Server, but now we've got several contracts kind of funding a lot of exciting new capability in this technology. And you'll notice that I talk about a BISim World Server and separately a VBS World Server. And I know it's a little bit confusing. The BISim World Server refers to the framework, the server of servers that we can put together in certain ways to build products that stream terrain to runtimes. And then the VBS World Server is a product built upon the World Server technologies that's designed to stream specifically to VBS4 and VBS Blue IG. So the World Server is a full-featured framework that provides a lot of very important capability. And the World Server can also incorporate non-BISim terrain servers, for example, Maxar with One World Terrain and also Bing, but this is not a comprehensive list. We also support Google Maps, for example, as well. And on the right, you can see some screenshots of this. Now, it's really important to note that we have built out the planets in quite some detail. We have thousands of high-fidelity vegetation and object 3D models populating the virtual Earth. We have defined over 50 biomes, and you can see kind of 3 of those here in these screenshots. This biome here is somewhere in the Mediterranean, this is Arizona, and this is somewhere in Africa. And the biomes define the types of trees, obviously, the tree density, where the trees will grow. Maybe they won't grow at very high altitudes. And this data, plus the procedurally generated road and building data that we have, provide a really detailed base globe that allows you to train anywhere with a couple of clicks of a button. So I want to talk about procedural refinement because it's a very important function of the VBS Blue engine. But as you'll see, we're not doing it only on the engine, we're doing it also on the World Server. Now, VBS Blue is a rendering and data ingestion engine. So the rendering is obvious. It takes 3D content and renders it with really nice lighting, with correct levels of detail from space down to blades of grass. But terrain ingestion is all about taking various data layers, procedurally enhancing them and rendering them to give this nice, dense, realistic content at ground level over the entire planet. So this is a short video that I took myself. We're starting here in Poland at ground level. We're rendering the vegetation at high fidelity, realistic tree density with this specific biome. And as we bring the camera out into space, you'll see the seamless transition from blades of grass at ground level out into space. There isn't really any noticeable level of detail switching. And what we aim to achieve is this correlation between high altitude flight or even objects in space, for example, a satellite looking down at the ground, and infantry operating on that ground. We want to provide this seamless experience because that's very important for multi-domain operations, a key function of military simulation today. So the video is going to continue and just show you some other functions of the engine and what we can do with procedural generation. With procedural generation, we can do seasons very easily without needing to reload the terrain. So winter, summer, and autumn shown here, kind of seamlessly transitioning. This is a shot of Arizona. We're looking out over the Grand Canyon here. We're actually using satellite data here from Microsoft Bing. And we can see a biome that's specific to that region. And here we have a jungle biome, or one of our jungle biomes. It's one of our thickest biomes, a very, very dense vegetation, an obstacle even to infantry movement, really multiple canopies represented here. This is a location in Vietnam. We have Uluru here in Australia, a desert terrain with scrubby saltbush and small trees. And here we're showing some 3D data from Microsoft Bing. So this is being live loaded from Microsoft using their API and seamlessly meshed into the rendering that VBS Blue provides. And so you can see that we're meshing the 3D data with the surrounding terrain perfectly. And this is really exciting. This is very similar data to what you'll get from the Maxar One World Terrain well-formed format. And this is the last scene here. So this is Munich. Again, more data from Microsoft. This time showing a river. So this is one of our procedural waterways going through Munich there down the center. So that was a lot of really nice procedural generation that you just saw. And we're very proud of our engine. It uses all of the modern AAA game rendering techniques that you would expect to give you a photorealistic experience. And now I mentioned that the procedural generation is happening both in the engine and on the server. And so what we've done, we've made the procedural generation technology a component, and that component resides also on our World Server. which means that we can do a portion of the procedural generation here on the world server and then stream that out not only to VBS, but other runtimes. Now, the VBS World Server that we ship with VBS4 and VBS Blue IG can't do this, but the framework is absolutely capable of doing this, and I'll give you proof in just a few slides. And this is a fundamental difference in our approach. Typically, procedural generation is a function purely of the rendering engine. So if you've played games like Star Citizen, Kerbal Space Program, Elite Dangerous, that nice procedural generation they're doing to render entire planets is really exclusive to their engine. We've made that available to all engines that are connected to the world server, which is a really important capability. Now, we provide a procedural base globe, but we also support the concept of high resolution insets. And so this is an example here where we have high resolution GeoTIFF, which has been quickly imported using VBS Geo and conflated or merged with the base terrain, for example, the vegetation that you can see here in the background. So we absolutely support ultra high resolution imagery imported as an inset as well. Now, we do support other engines, and we've been working with Epic on this recently to ensure that we can support the Unreal Engine from the world server technology. And so we have our world server here with its procedurally enhanced database. We have the blue pipeline, which is that modular procedural rendering component, and we've connected that with Unreal. And what that does is ensure that the same procedurally enhanced terrain data can be rendered in Unreal as in VBS. And now these are work in progress screenshots here, so we're still working on this. We do expect to have this wrapped up this month, and we're quite excited about this. But it's not because we're about to abandon our own engine for a different runtime. So the VBS Blue engine, we've built that up over the last number of years to be really perfect for military simulation. So as you would have seen in the video, we support WGS84 64-bit positioning with unlimited view distance out of the box. That's just a function of the engine. And we already leverage a lot of the same rendering techniques that you'll see in these new engines to make sure that our content is being rendered at very high fidelity. And we also support all of the latest VR and MR headsets, for example, Vario XR3, as I described earlier. But where this is really interesting is if you want to connect VBS4 or VBS Blue IG to Unreal application. So for example, a browser-based application or a mobile application that's built in Unreal, you can rest assured that the same terrain data can flow down to the Unreal Engine. So that's why this is quite exciting. And we're not opposed, certainly, to doing further work with Unreal. It's been a good experience overall. We've enjoyed working with Seb, and we look forward to bringing you more news around this integration in the near future. So the world server facilitates rapid terrain editing, and this is a really key point. Within 10 seconds, you can load up VBS4 or VBS Blue IG and start training anywhere on the planet with a high resolution base globe. Within 10 minutes, you can use VBS Geo and VBS4 to modify the procedural terrain, including importing GeoTIFFs, new high resolution imagery, new roads, new buildings. And then within 10 hours, you can build out massive areas. And this is where you might use TerraTools because you need to import an entire country worth of data onto the world server. But this is dramatically faster than what we've seen with previous military simulations. We're now going to move on and talk about VBS4 specifically, built on top of the VBS Blue engine and also capable of connecting to the VBS World Server. Now, VBS4 is a whole earth virtual desktop trainer and simulation host that allows you to create and run any imaginable military training scenario. And there are 6 key reasons why VBS4 is interesting, especially if you're a VBS3 user. And the first one, obviously, is that you can train anywhere on Earth. The rendering engine is completely new, built from the ground up, as I've previously described. We've also added new capability to increase the speed of scenario creation. For example, the VBS Plan component, as well as the new 3D model import pipeline that I'll describe in a minute. You can generate and edit terrains much faster. We have the new VBS Geo mode of VBS4 built into the workflow. You can get in and build an inset very quickly without specialized training being required. We allow you to save admin costs by using centralized data. So the VBS World Server means you can centralize your terrain data. And we also store Battlespaces on the VBS World Server as well. We have completely new AI to reduce the need for human operators. And VBS4 includes all VBS3 capability plus supports some new use cases. For example, mission planning use cases facilitated by VBS Plan. So we're really excited about this release. It's been a huge year. We released VBS4 back in May, and we already have premier military organizations buying licenses and upgrading VBS3. So this is the VBS4 workflow. You would do your planning at the higher levels, maybe your brigade staff, in your mission command information systems or your battle management systems. And VBS4 is designed to import a plan in the MSDL format as a starting point for kind of lower level planning. So the VBS4 sweet spot is really combat team. It's platoon level maneuvers. And VBS Plan is provided so that commanders or administrators can easily create a tactical plan without worrying about placing every single object and creating triggers and placing down waypoints, which are things that a VBS3 user is very familiar with. And we have VBS Geo there for scenario-specific terrain edits, and obviously VBS Editor as well. VBS Editor is effectively the VBS3 offline mission editor ported across to VBS4. We didn't want to put in a new editor because we wanted VBS3 users to pick up VBS4 and just start using the product without having to do another training course, for example. You can then execute virtual simulation or constructive simulation. And the constructive simulation piece is really unique to VBS4. Now, VBS3's AI was game-based. It wasn't deterministic or doctrinal, which meant that VBS3 was primarily a human-in-the-loop virtual simulator. But in VBS4, we've got this fantastic possibility to use it as a constructive sim at that combat team to battalion level, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. The VBS real-time editor is included, so there's an iOS included, and then of course you would do after-action review and rinse and repeat. So this workflow, it's a little bit more complex than the VBS3 workflow, but once you get used to it, it's quite straightforward. Now here's a different view of the same workflow where you would import data of various types into the prepare phase. Some of the data formats here I've already spoken about, so MSDL for example. 3D models I'll talk about soon. VBS control behaviors, that's our AI behaviors, and terrain data I've already spoken about. You then build your plan, do tweaks, build terrain. You do this until your content is finished. You would then configure your classroom for training. We include VBS radio with VBS4 as well as VBS gateway, which is a HLA and DISC gateway. You would then execute your training, and we have a new call for fire module that's included with VBS4 to simulate offensive fire, and then you would assess performance in the VBS AAR. Now, I don't have time in this video to go into detail about how to use VBS4. This is more of an update video, but if you go to VBS4.com, you will see that there at the bottom are links for 3 presentations. And it was the VBS Technology Conference back from May. And there's over 3 hours of content there. In the first video, I provide an overview of the first-person capabilities of VBS4 plus VBS Geo, VBS Plan. On day 2, we do a deep dive into VBS Geo, VBS Plan, and also artificial intelligence. The last 25 minutes of this is really, really interesting when we kind of do a deep dive into our artificial intelligence. And then the day 3 brief is really focused on integrators and the SDKs and the various tools that we offer with VBS4. So I'm sorry to tell you to go away and do your homework, but really this is definitely content that you need to check out if you're interested in an introduction to VBS4. So I'm going to assume that from here on you're aware of VBS4 and its base capabilities, and if you need more information, please head to VBS4.com. So first off, let's talk about some of these data formats here on the left. So let's start with AI behaviors. Now we have a new AI framework called VBS Control AI. that has been built from the ground up for military simulation, just like our new engine. And we built this framework because we saw that game middleware artificial intelligence, the AI that you would typically see in a computer game for entertainment, just wasn't providing what we needed for this whole Earth military training. So VBS4 includes the entire planet. So we need AI that can dynamically path plan based upon whatever is there. It can work with any tree density, and it also works for both infantry, vehicles, and aircraft. So VBS Control is a framework that provides an API to our simulation engine, an AI library, and the behaviors themselves. And the behaviors are created in the VBS Control editor, which is included with our SDK. And they're very powerful, and with VBS4 we ship generic platoon, squad, and fire team behaviors that you can use in VBS Plan. So I shot this video yesterday just to give you an idea of what VBS Control looks like. So this is just a covers demonstration. So the blue lines are positions of cover that have been calculated dynamically by the AI system. And this is a fire team behavior that is just keeping these 4 soldiers in cover. And they'll engage targets just like that if they need to. But as we move the cover threat around and the cover position around, you'll see that these soldiers change their position accordingly. And this is heavily parameterized, which means that there's a weighting. They want to keep in formation, but they also want to be able to stay in cover, but they also want to be able to engage the target. And that's determining where exactly they are positioned. And as I move the obstacle around, you can see that its cover is updating as well. So here, for example, I've placed an obstacle in front of the cover threat, so the soldiers will move to ensure that they can still put fire down onto the target. And these low-level AI behaviors are incorporated into our platoon behaviors and our other behaviors, resulting in a very high-fidelity AI system. And this is an example of another fire team behavior. So here we effectively have a move order and a fire team which will move with 2 soldiers kind of bounding together, looking out for each other, and they're going to move through this environment. And the key point here is that I want you to take note of the fidelity. We're really interested in the highest possible fidelity artificial intelligence and then scaling that up because we think that's a unique approach for constructive simulation. So we're really excited about our new artificial intelligence. You can try it out for yourself in VBS4. This little terrain is completely dynamic. It's the test terrain that our AI team put together. They move things around and make sure that the AI still operates in a sensible manner. And we've also enhanced scalability in VBS4. So we can support up to 2,000 entities in a single scenario in 20.1, the VBS4 version that's already released. And we are certainly working to scale this up further in the near future. And we actually have a video already on YouTube. I'm just going to let that run and talk through it now because I do think it's important. We did a demonstration of this earlier in the year. So this was a small Blue 4 brigade up against an Op 4 battalion with platoon level maneuver groups, and you can see that we laid out this plan in VBS Plan. That's what you can see on the screen here. It took about an hour to build this specific scenario. You can see all the boundaries and phase lines. And this is just the 3D preview of where everything is going to be and when, in accordance with the phase lines. And we haven't taken any shortcuts with the AI. So the AI behaviors are all entity level. Every soldier is represented, every vehicle is represented and operating at high fidelity. So tanks will try and use cover, tanks will path plan correctly, they won't go through buildings, they won't go through trees. That's what you can see here on the screen. And the same goes for our infantry. So as you can see, we have infantry forces here, path planning and moving around in accordance with their behaviors. Now, VBS Control AI also supports civilian pattern of life behaviors. And using VBS Control, we support about 2,000 entities there as well. So that's what you can see here is 2,000 civilian entities in a scenario running at high frame rates. And this is a demonstration of 5,000 animated and moving entities in the field of view running at 60 frames per second. So this is a massive crowd simulation running here in San Francisco within VBS. So I want to talk now about 3D model import, and keeping with this theme of making the generation of training content faster. So I'm going to run a video now that Julian, who is the lead on our model exchanger tool, the lead effectively on our new import pipeline in VBS4, he's going to talk you through the new pipeline, starting with a comparison to VBS3.
Hello, my name is Julian, and in this video I will provide an overview of the VBS4 asset workflow, the content import pipeline, and also compare that to the VBS3 content pipeline, the process that you may have been familiar with so far for VBS3. We'll start with a quick refresher of how that is to appreciate how the new workflow improves over this. We start with a 3D model created in 3ds Max or Maya in any dedicated content creation tool, provided it can export a format that model converter can handle. This is usually Collada or FBX. Model converter is an application present in our development suite. From there, it is exported to P3D, which allows Oxygen 2, our internal 3D setup content tool, to make the necessary changes to assign textures, assign name selections, make all the other adjustments and simulation needs that an asset requires for VBS3. This is paired with a manual config setup and then packaged using add-on packer to make it VBS3 ready. The VBS4 asset workflow is more simplified. We still have our 3D asset created in a dedicated content creation tool. However, Oxygen is no longer required. Instead, we have a new tool called Model Exchanger. Model Exchanger is not a 3D editing tool the way Oxygen 2 was. Instead, it is simply a converter, a analysis tool, and also a helper tool that generates geometry LODs and visual LODs for you so that you can continue to work and store your full asset, fully set up and fully VBS ready in your dedicated content creation tool. So in detail, this means that your work you are doing in your industry standard tools, like 3ds Max, any of the other dedicated content creation tools, you can work with a cycle where you generate your asset, send it to Model Exchanger. Model Exchanger will assess the validity of your asset, and if so, recommends changes to be made or generates new data for you, which you then import back into your standard tool and then regenerate new data that can then be rechecked and once passed, exported as P3D.
So I tasked Julian just yesterday with proving that the workflow is much faster. So he went on to TurboSquid and for $140 bought this box of 3D models. So straight off TurboSquid, and in 30 minutes he was able to get this into VBS4 as fully working content. Now he's working in Blender. Now Blender is a completely free 3D modeling tool. So you don't need to buy an expensive license of 3D Studio Max to import content into VBS4. And most of the work here in Blender is simply assigning the selection names. So telling the engine what the wheels are, what the gun is, what the turret orientation should be, how far it can rotate. And so this has been sped up a lot. So it's 30 minutes of work in 1 minute. And I'm just going to pause it once we get this content in game. Now this is the Model Exchanger tool. It's creating all of the level of details. It's got a convex hull generator, whatever that is. And now he's packing the content, loading up VBS4, placing that new content in VBS4, and I'm just going to pause it right there. So what you can see here is the new content running in VBS4 with animated wheels, the turret, the machine gun, all working as you would expect, direct from TurboSquid in under 30 minutes. Now, we don't recommend that you generally do this. This is a very kind of low quality model. It has no interior, for example, but this really does prove that it is easy and quick to get new 3D content into VBS4. Now we're going to look at the prepare phase and the updates that we've made to the modules that you can see here in VBS Plan, VBS Editor, and VBS Geo. So just a quick refresher, this is what the main menu of VBS4 looks like. This is the Battlespaces menu, and a battlespace consists of a collection of terrain edits, mission plan components, for example, maneuvers, and specific tweaks to the scenario, for example, placement of IEDs. And here you can run through the entire workflow the prepare, execute, and assess workflow. This would load the after action review. Now, one of the updates you're going to see in the near future is this new screen that's being added for trainees. At the moment in the VBS4 20.1 release, a trainee needs to log into VBS4 by using the launcher. You'll see that in just a minute, and it's a little bit cumbersome, which is why we have created this new page. So if you log into VBS4 as a trainee, i.e. you don't have administrator rights, this is where you can access your tutorial missions as well as connect to a multiplayer server. So this is going to be in a VBS4 release early next year. I want to talk about some of the upcoming enhancements now that you're going to see in future versions of VBS4. I mean, we just released VBS4 20.1.2 this week, so that's available now. We are expecting a 20.1.3 early next year, and then of course another major VBS4 release. We're still just confirming the exact timeline. So let's have a look at some of the things you're going to see in the next VBS4 release. And this first video is going to focus on the user interface. So I spoke earlier about the launcher. So we've redesigned the launcher for VBS4, and we actually have made the same changes to the VBS3 launcher to make it a bit easier to use. So you can see the tabs here have been separated now into client and server, and you can also see that there is a parameter preview along the bottom. So the idea is here that you know exactly what parameters are going to be used to start VBS. I know it's a little bit boring, but for administrators, I think they'll find this tremendously useful and help, I guess, reduce the learning curve for VBS4. And we also have links up here to some VBS4 folders and also a link directly to help on launcher that loads up from the VBS4 directory. And there's a restart as remote button, as you can see, to make it easier to start remote launches, which means you can start VBS4 in a battle simulation center much quicker. It starts it up on all computers. So this video just shows you the new UI for VBS4. We have refactored it to look like the rest of the VBS4 interface. So we've changed the colors, we've changed the way the buttons look, and it includes some quality of life improvements as well, but primarily it's just a reskin effectively to make sure that the VBS4 UI is consistent. And finally, we have built some quality of life improvements into the network lobby. So what you can see here is an administrator machine and a trainee machine. The administrator now can change the names of connected participants directly within this interface, as well as reset names back to default. The administrator can change the color of trainee armbands. And you can see here that we also have support for hidden units. So if you forget to make units playable in the mission editor, you still have access to every unit in the mission from the network lobby. So just there, I created another 5 playable slots. And by pressing the button at the top, we can actually see there's another playable group, and I can make that playable as well. So this should reduce the need to kind of go back to the mission editor to correct mistakes and place down individual new playable units. You can just do it directly within the MP lobby, which will save you some time. And we've got a new search function, so you can actually search by unit name or player name or group name directly in the MP lobby. That's going to help if you have 250 participants, finding specific units using the search feature. And the search feature also works directly in the player pool on the left as well. And finally, there's a new function just to view everybody's IP address. This is to help with auto assignment. You can just paste that into Notepad. So that's the UI redesign and some of the quality of life improvements that we've made, and you'll see in future VBS4 releases. So VBS Geo is the easy to use, what you see is what you get terrain editing component within VBS4. We've continued to improve this. I've got a quick video here to show just one of the new enhancements in an upcoming release. So this is placing down a fence. You can modify very easily the 3D content that comprises that fence. So you can actually change the type of 3D model that is being used. So here we have a single model. We can just click on plus, select a different type of wall using the search function here. And so now we have a different type of wall or a different color of wall here. And you can add as many different segments as you need, and you can modify the segments, change their orientation, change their offsets as needed. And there's a new skew to slope function as well. So to make it look more like a realistic fence, it's just snapping to the surface, as you can see when you press skew to slope. And just finally, just here's another example. So this is some guardhouses along a fence that have been built using the same very easy to use tool. So you can create custom fences very easily directly in VBS Geo and snap them to the ground. So that's just one of the new enhancements you'll see in VBS Geo. Now, VBS Plan is the intuitive mission planning and execution tool that's built into VBS4. It's accessible via the Plan button here in the VBS4 Prepare workflow. The idea is that it's easy to draw and execute a plan. You're drawing these military symbols. You're not worrying about placing down individual units. You then click Build Mission to create the scenario, and then you can just execute it directly. We're very proud of this tool. Initial feedback has been positive. You can have a timeline with specific phase lines that synchronize the movement of the various maneuver units. One of the new improvements you're going to see is the new fire mission capability, so offensive fire planning capability in VBS Plan. I've got a quick video now of that. So this is a video of the VBS Plan interface, and we're placing down targets here. So the first one is going to be a box target. So that target has now been created. And now we'll do a linear target. And so these are added by pressing the target icon here and double clicking on the terrain. So we have these two different targets. We're going to place down a mortar platoon here. This is an Australian mortar platoon. Create that mortar platoon by clicking Build Mission. So we've now created that content in 3D, and we can effectively order offensive fire in the interface as part of our plan with different round types and different parameters, as you can see. And if we update the engagement time, we see down here that the plan has been updated accordingly. And this is the results in game. So we actually have in this particular scenario some mortars and some howitzers impacting on the box target at pretty much the same time. So we've had an effect on target here, and this is perfectly integrated with the Fire Direction Center. So the Fire Direction Center is a capability within VBS4 that allows an administrator to create calls for fire at runtime for many different types of assets. So howitzers, MLRS, naval gunfire, and we've integrated the planning component, so placing down fire in VBS Plan with this runtime Fire Direction Center. So you can modify, cancel fire orders if you need to. So that's one of the new features that we've included in VBS Plan. Now VBS3, their use cases in VBS3 are fully supported in VBS4. The VBS3 OME and RTE are included with VBS4. We've renamed it to Editor. We've included all of the VBS3 3D content and much more, as you saw. And you can also import VBS3 terrains into VBS4. And I actually, we have a video on YouTube showing how to do this. It's well documented in the manual. You obviously need VBS3 and the terrain you want to convert to VBS4, and you just follow this process. And we have the tutorial on our YouTube channel. So this just describes that process really briefly. So here we're selecting a specific VBS3 terrain. And there is going to be a new menu item to export that to the VBS World Server. So File, Convert to VBS4 Terrain. You type in your World Server IP address, you can verify, and then you just click Convert. So it's a couple of clicks, and what that's doing is converting the terrain and loading that terrain onto the VBS World Server. And then once you log into VBS4, connected to the World Server, you will automatically see that terrain in-game because it'll be streamed to the local computer automatically. So to do the conversion, you do need the VBS World Server installed, but once it's converted, you can actually copy the files onto individual VBS4 clients if you don't want to use the VBS World Server for whatever reason. So here we see that that exact same terrain imported into VBS4. And there are various options, for example, to make sure that trees are in exactly the same location if that's what you need, depending on the level of correlation you're aiming to achieve. So that's what's new in VBS4 and what's upcoming. I do encourage you to visit VBS4.com. Like I said, we have those tutorials down the bottom of this page and a ton of information. If you're interested in a demonstration, if you're interested in a trial license, please reach out and contact us.